Hi everybody, my name is Joanne Carries and I'm so excited to share this tutorial which follows the tutorial presented by Design Cuts on its own website, and it's called Applying Fine Art Textures to Your Photography Work. On the website there are detailed instructions and I've simply created this video so that you can follow along. This was the starting point. This was the before, beautiful photo, and the end result, applying many beautiful textures to achieve a really interesting sort of background. As you can see, has been filled in with texture, and the flower itself has some beautiful texture applied to it. So let's get going. I hope you enjoy this. Stay tuned to the end because I have a lot of little surprises for you. Anyway, so step number one, here we go. We're going to start here with the original image, and as it's coming up, I just want to mention that I have access to my images by using Photoshop's built-in mini bridge function. So I don't have to go back and forth to a folder. It's all right here, and I believe most versions of Photoshop use this. I'm using Photoshop Creative Cloud. Okay, so here below the photograph are the textures we're going to apply one by one. I'm going to click on the first one called Ancient Times 2, drag and drop it right on top of the photo so you see it's on its own layer. Now what Design Cuts did was, by experimenting with different blend modes, instead of the normal, which is the default, they changed the blend mode to overlay and then adjusted the opacity to 60%, like that. So you can see immediately that it provided some graininess to both the background and the flower, and that's really great. I mean, you could just stop there and be happy with that result. But let's move on. So the next texture is called Burnished 3, and simply drag and drop it, click OK. Here it is on its own layer. And for this one, using the blend mode again of overlay, but this time at 20%. You can see as I drag the slider that has a different visual impact. And then we're going to grab this Two Little Owls Cosmos number 14 texture, drag it and drop it, click OK, and here it is. And for this one, let's again follow Design Cuts lead. Cosmos is the overlay blend, and it is at 40%, like so. So you can see that added some really nice little twinkly stars or sparkles to the background. Moving on, Heirloom, drag, drop, click OK, and here it is on top of the layers pile. Again, we're going to use overlay, and this time 25%. Now you can experiment to your heart's content and see what really suits your fancy and what you really have the most fun with as a photographer or artist or illustrator. Let's take this very next one called Firecracker 5, drag and drop it, click OK, and now instead of overlay we're going to soft light, and we're going to reduce the opacity to 40%, like that. And that added some darkening around this edge. At least it looks that way to my eye. Then next to the last, Forgotten 2 texture, drag and drop it, click OK, and for the blend mode this time we're going to use hard light and the opacity at 25%. To make it exact, there we go. Now, finally, Frenzy, drag and drop. Click OK. And now we're using the soft light blend mode back at 25%, like so. And that is essentially the after effect that was achieved by layering all the textures onto the original image. However, let's take this a few steps along. So I'm going to select all of the layers and right click, duplicate them, and click OK. So here are all of the new duplicated layers. They're highlighted. Right click, and we're going to merge them together. By doing that, we don't need the layers below because we're going to use this as our working layer, and we want to essentially sharpen it. So let's call this layer Sharpen. Now it's a soft appearance. It's, you know, something that you may like enough to stop here, but just for the sake of showing you how design cuts achieve their final result, we're going to filter and other, high pass. Now what this does is bring out some of the crispness in the photograph. You can see the edges are somewhat highlighted. Design Cuts chose a radius of 1.0 pixels, so that's what I'm going to do here, and click OK. Now let's bring back the layers below and set the opacity or the blend mode to overlay. And look at the difference. A little bit blurry, kind of a depth of field, beautiful as it is, but notice how much more graininess and texturized the overall appearance is. So we could stop there, but again, let's follow Design Cuts instructions. And going to the bottom of the layers panel to create a solid color layer. And I've already chosen red, so I'll click OK. For this layer that's highlighted with the color, I'm going to rasterize it. So essentially it's a flat layer with no properties of its own except for color. It's non-editable. Basically we're going to use it to create a vignette. So let's call this the vignette layer. And I'm going to right click, double click on that layer and select the inner glow option, layer style. And then I'm going to change a few things around, starting with using normal at 100% opacity. And in this little square, you can set the color of the glow. And we want it to be dark and not light. So let's change it to black. Okay. And then bring the size. You can see as I'm pulling this all the way over to the right to 250 pixels how it creates this rounded central focus to the layer. And in order to make it distinctive on the image below, we're going to take the fill opacity and bring it down to 0. And that exposes the center of the image of the flower and the opacity of the main image to 10%. Again, you can experiment by going back and forth. any which way, but this is the way Design Cuts did it, so that's the way I wanted to show it to you. And essentially this was the very end result that Design Cuts achieved. I promised you a surprise, so here we go. I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to add text to this. Now this is a text called Micro Brew 4, which is part of Design Cuts Monster Font Bundle, which I absolutely adore. And let's do this for Design Cuts. There we go. Let me put this about like that. Double clicking to bring up the layer style menu, and I think I want to change the overlay color to this color where my pointer is, not gray, a darker brown. How about that? Alright, and that's basically all I'm going to do for now. I could play with lots of other effects, but that gives it another added dimension, and as I said, there's no end to what you can do with the textures and the fonts. So thank you to Design Cuts. Please leave a comment, let them know your thoughts about this tutorial, others that you might like to see, and I hope you've enjoyed this. So have fun with textures and fonts. Bye for now.